Welcome to Misshelved, the show that allows readers to listen as independent booksellers chat with their favorite authors. I'm your host, Nicole Brinkley. Before I launch into today's episode, I just want to thank you all for the love I've seen so far for the show. This has been my baby project, and it's been an honor to bring it to all of your ears. Please keep up the love, subscribing, sharing, turning those episode notifications on, and reviewing where you can. We're just getting started here, and there are so many booksellers I can't wait for you to meet. And that includes today's bookseller, Jean Michel.
My name is Jean Michel, and I am a bookseller and owner of a comic book store in the Hudson Valley called Megabrain Comics Arcade.
Comic book stores are independent bookstores too, and Jean's store, Megabrain Comics, is my local comic book store. I love it to bits. Jean also designed our incredible logo, so once this episode is over, please go give him all the love. Jean's partner for today is the legendary Marc Bernardin.
My name is Marc Bernardin. I write comic books like Genius. I write on TV shows like Star Trek Picard and Treadstone and Castle Rock. I'm also a podcaster on the Battlestar Galacticast and Fat Man Beyond with Kevin Smith.
Settle in as these two brilliant creators talk about growing up Black in a predominantly white nerd culture, the comics they're reading now, and what the current nerd culture holds.
Marc, the reason I've asked you to come here today is essentially to talk about what it was like growing up Black in America as a nerd, as a fan of, comics and sci-fi and fantasy, and how that informed where you ended up when all the stuff that we had at our fingertips when we were kids, kind of like TV and movies and film and comics, never had us in it. It's weird to me that growing up reading all this stuff and never seeing yourself in it, and yet somehow there's this contingent of Black nerds that still kind of flourished in geekdom, I guess it would.
I think that there is a weirdness of growing up, especially, in the 70s and I guess the 80s.
Yeah.
Where, it's not that you didn't see yourself. It's that you never saw yourself in the center. The first real memory that I have, period, of all things, of existence in life, is seeing Star Wars for the first time. And, that's a pretty huge thing for a 6 or 7 year old. I mean, I have fractions of memories before then. It's not like I was a blank slate built in a lab who was just cracked into the open air at 8 years old. But, the vividity of Star Wars was huge for me. That first movie, I suppose I always thought Darth Vader was a Black dude, especially because he sounded like a Black dude.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a bad guy, I get it, but whatever, he's still super cool. That's fine. Then you get to, Star Trek, and oh, hey, there's Uhura. That's cool. What's she doing? Well, she's kind of the operator, the switchboard lady. Then you get to Lando Calrissian. This is badass. What's his deal? Oh, well, he's kind of like a space pimp. But, he used to be the cool dude's best friend, but then it went bad, and he's always macking on the white girls, and,
and ends up betraying them also on top of that.
Totally. Has this massive sort of moral flip-flop of, I'm your friend. I'm not your friend. I'm betraying you. I'm your friend again.
Yeah.
We're there. We're just always on the periphery, and we're never quite integral to anything.
Yeah.
But it's also not a thing that as a kid you understand, really. Representation is not a thing that until 10 years ago, your average adult didn't know that phrase. But as a kid, it's just, I like the things I like. I happen to like spaceships and laser beams and fast cars and explosions, and so I will gravitate myself towards all those things. And that's the peculiarity of growing up as a Black nerd. I mean, as a Black ingester of anything pop culture, it's like you've got to find your way in. There always is a way in. There's always a way to enjoy the things you're eventually going to enjoy, but it's never because, oh, yeah, I totally identify with the main character.
Yeah.
I totally understand, what it's like to live on a farm and find your parents killed and be thrust into the center of cosmic intrigue and daring do. You just don't see yourself in that. But you find ways to like it. You find ways to enjoy it. I remember growing up, I was born in the Bronx. My father's from Haiti. My mom was born in the U.S. And so all of the kids that I knew, by and large, were people of color. They were either Black or they were Latinx or some mixture of the two. And we all kind of still love the same things. We all loved Godzilla movies. We all loved Kiss. We all loved Kung Fu Theater on 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays. And that was our jam. It wasn't until I moved to the suburbs and didn't run into A, lots of other Black folks, and B, any other Black nerds.
That was where I grew up, in the suburbs above New York. I mean, it wasn't bad because Rockland County is a pretty diverse place. It has a huge Haitian community. Most of them are my family. And there's a huge Jewish community and Asians and Irish and Italian. But the weird thing about the suburbs is that everybody has their own parts of town. It's not so much segregated as like, oh, this is where Irish people live in Pearl River just because they've been there for, 40 or 50 years. And that's where every time a cousin would move, they'd buy their house there.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's like mild segregation. And so I had a couple of nerd friends, but they were all white. And we were on the playground playing like the A team. Of course, I'm B.A. Baracus, which isn't too bad. But
right.
when you go out to play one day and you're like, actually, I want to be Hannibal. And they're like, well, you can't. And it's like, oh okay. I guess I'll just keep being Mr. T. I always had city envy because of that. Because I would meet kids from the city and be like, oh, crap, I love this. Yeah, the suburbs, I mean, there's good and bad.
Yeah, I mean, there always is. There always is. As a kid, it's difficult to draw those lines because your perspective is so skewed.
Yeah.
I didn't know we were poor when I was growing up in the Bronx because I didn't know anybody who was rich. This is just everybody was this. Unless you're on TV. It's like, oh man, the Drummonds, those guys are rich. And the guys in Sanford and Son, those guys are poor. Once I moved to the suburbs, I met proper nerds, and this would have been in the 80s. And so comic book retailers was a booming business, which as hard as it is to believe, but the idea of there being a direct market.
I had 2 comic book stores in my town, which like is unheard of these days.
Seriously, you're just lousy with choice if you have 2 stores. Finding those guys who were, and it was invariably guys, and not because I don't believe that there were women nerds, just that the social pressures to disguise anything that made you a little bit different were so huge that if there were girls out there who were loving comic books, I didn't know any. If there were girls out there who were playing D&D and video games, I didn't know any.
Yeah.
I believe they were there.
They weren't about to be like, hey, you guys want to come over and roll some dice?
I remember when it's like, 10 years ago when Twilight first made its appearance at Comic-Con, and there were all these guys. This is not, like, I don't know what you're doing here. This isn't real genre. Like, why are you even, like, you should just go back to wherever you came from. It's like, guys, fellas, I don't want to alarm you, but this is the dream, yo. Like, this is a flock of women who love kind of the same thing you love, who want to be in the same place you are.
It's insane to me how the gatekeepers, how in the same breath they can complain about one thing, and then at the drop of a hat, when they actually get the thing that they were complaining about, complain about it.
I do think fandom, in a way, is by design, in its DNA, is an us versus them proposition, right? Like from the very beginning, it's like, listen, we 3 people in this room are the only ones who love this as much as we do. And everybody out there is a normie and they can't possibly understand what we love about this. And then when the thing becomes huge, like Star Wars did, it's like, oh, well, everybody loves it. Well, everybody doesn't love it the way I love it. you start to find ways to cordon yourself off. Like, well, oh, you came in a Jedi. Like, you weren't like an OG fan. Like, you just love the Ewoks, and that's your thing.
We didn't invite you into this room. Like, you just found it.
Yeah, you found it, but you don't believe it. It's not a religion for you the way it is for me. We needed a common enemy, and once everybody became the enemy, you start segmenting within the fandom. And that's how you get people who hate black stormtroopers and Asian mechanics simply because, well, listen, my Star Wars doesn't have this in it. Like, but Shouldn't it though? Like, is that a
I,
bad
I
thing?
honestly cannot wait to see what the 9 and 12 and 16-year-olds of today are gonna end up being like when they're growing up with things like Lovecraft Country and Star Trek Discovery. There's all these shows and movies, and I mean, Black Panther, just like that in itself, having all this stuff that's telling you it's not even that it's okay, it's just telling you this is how it is. What kind of stuff are they going to end up making? You know what I mean? I think some really cool stuff is going to end up happening.
I've felt the desire to say, like, guys, you don't know how easy you have it. Like, it was
In
so
my
much harder
day,
when I was a kid to find any of this stuff. But the fact that it won't be a thing you even have to
yeah,
mention anymore just kind of tickles me. I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. This my Star Trek has only
yeah,
black people in it, and nobody even looks
yeah,
sideways at it. It's going to get to a point, knock on wood, where the very idea of inclusivity and representation is not a thing you have to advocate for. It just will be because there's a generation, to your point, that won't know it
yeah,
any other way. And it won't even occur to them to not be inclusive because this is the world they grew up watching. This is the world they live in. So why wouldn't it reflect in the art
yeah.
that they make? I'm happy to be the crazy old man on the mountain who keeps saying, I remember when it used to be harder to do this, but I'm glad it doesn't.
We had the Hulk. That was it.
Yeah. You wanted a colored character. You got the vision. He was purple.
I I don't know. It's weird and frustrating at the same time. I guess it's the like, why are you just getting this now kind of mentality. You know what I mean? Like it's so obvious.
It's so obvious, and it always is very much a like, guys, you leave the
Yeah,
money on the table for an industry, any version of a sort of mass media enterprise. You hit as many
yeah,
audiences as you can, and you make them love the thing that you're making. And to not understand that, or to have forgotten that. I remember not too long ago, just on a lark, looking up what the top 10 television shows were in like
well,
1976.
yeah,
And a full 4 out of those 10 are like The Jeffersons, Good Times, Sanford and Son.
I feel like in the 70s and 80s we did get to see ourselves a lot on television, but it was only in the capacity of, oh my god, those brown people really make me laugh. Then you get into Buck Rogers and the Hulk and Fall Guy and anything that was action and cool, it was always a white guy with really big hair. And then
Mhm.
sometimes you had somebody on Magnum, what was his name? TC?
The ways you got to see black people were
Yeah,
definitely different. The thing that I was realizing digging into some of those old sitcoms, especially, was the portrayal. I mean, yes, they were comedies, and yes, they weren't minstrel
yeah,
shows, but they were definitely supposed to be a little bit
yeah,
outlandish. But even still, the way the sitcoms, decade by decade, would reflect the sort of mood of Black America at the time was kind of fascinating. In that, like, the 60s, all we wanted to do was to be on TV. Just give us some dignity. Give us I
oh
Spy,
yeah,
give us Diane Carroll as a nurse. By the time you get to the 70s, it's no, we all have some different inner lives, but it's all about upward mobility, showing where you're
yeah.
coming from. So it's like Good Times, or especially the Jeffersons,
Moving on up.
moving on up. By the time you get to the 80s, it's we have moved up. And so now we're the Huxtables. Now we are professionals. And now we are as good at what we do as anybody else is
Yeah,
at what they do.
that was the first time, and it's always so tough. I won't even dip
Yeah.
into the darker side of it, but the Cosby Show, it was literally the first time I remember watching anything that had to do just with black people, where it wasn't all about plight or where it wasn't starting in
Mhm.
play. Like even the Jeffersons, like they moved on up to the East Side. It was the first time where it was like, oh, we're just a black family. It was possibly the greatest thing for God knows how long for me.
It was massive if you were a kid at that time. Hell, if you were an
Yeah.
adult at that time, to just not have to have conversations with other people about the reality of your life that made it seem
Yeah,
alien to
and
them.
mom and dad are doctor and a lawyer. Like that's have you been watching Lovecraft Country at all?
I have been, yeah.
I'm not going to say anything about spoilers or anything like that. Lovecraft Country is about a black family in the 50s in Chicago, and they find themselves wrapped up in some very dark eldritch horror. It is, as someone once put it, Cthulhu-rific, but it's like that show just in episode one where you have this kind of exemplary scholarly family living amongst all that, where I feel like the rule of thumb was always just to show the stereotype. So having George and Hippolyta talking about astronomy, and she's kind of a math whiz, and Atticus is just this insanely well read dude. He's just a regular guy who reads a lot. You just don't see that ever. And that first episode, I was like, this may be the greatest show for me that I've ever watched.
It's definitely a show that means a lot to, certain people
Yeah.
and means less to others. It's also one of the first shows to be executed at that scale, at that level, that A, centers the sort of Black experience and also comes almost uniformly from Black creators.
Yeah.
You know, as much as I love Watchmen, and I love Watchmen to
Oh, I
death.
loved that. It made me care about the comic book again because I didn't care about that comic book probably since the 90s.
I've always been impressed by Watchmen, the comic, and
Yeah.
I completely understand its place in comics history, and I know exactly kind of what it did at the time that it did it. But there's always a bit of a remove to it, especially for me. I appreciate it more than I love it. But what that writing staff did is nothing short of Herculean. For it to be kind of filtered through Damon Lindelof's eyes.
Yeah.
And, Damon is as smart a person as I've ever met before.
I listened to a lot of his interviews while he was doing that. And as much as I wanted to be like, of course we needed somebody to white to kind of herald this, he did it with an insane amount of thoughtfulness and care, and in a way that I don't think anybody else would have done.
People ask me, especially the last 3 or 4 years, if it's okay for a person as a writer to write outside their race, which has become an issue,
Yeah.
needless to say. And the thing I always say is, if you're a writer, you should be allowed, A, and B, able to write anything. But you have to do the work. You have to do the work to get under the hood of those lives that you're attempting to portray.
Yeah, it's the same
Now,
thing that they say about men writing women. You can't have just a world of writers that are writing their own gender or their own race. But
right, but like you have to do the work. And, I've written probably more white characters than I have Black characters. And the reason I feel comfortable doing that is because I've spent 40 some odd years being raised in a white media environment.
yeah,
And nothing but experiencing the centered lives of white protagonists.
yeah,
Not to mention living in a white country.
yeah,
I'm pretty aware of the ways white people attack things and how their existences feel. Granted, every person's different, but I never feel questioning about that. If I'm writing an Asian character, it's like, oh, damn, I don't know how this person would feel about this. Let me do some work.
yeah.
Invariably, it ends up being white writers who just like, I just want to write it. But buddy, you don't know. You saw Do the Right Thing once. You don't know what it's like to be a Black person, and you haven't done the work to find that out. And Damon did that work. Damon was like, I don't know this, so I'm going to do an immense amount of reading and listening. I'm going to hire people who can help me work my way through this and find the story that feels legitimate and valid in this, and also call me on my own crap when I am coming at it from, and a very admittedly kind of white male cisgendered perspective.
Yeah.
I need to be broken of this, and I need people around me who will help me break out of this. That's how you get something like Watchmen.
The complete opposite of that would be when I was younger and somebody told me that there was actually a Haitian superhero, and I was introduced to Brother Voodoo. And I still have the first 3 issues, and I remember reading that comic and just thinking, "Wait, I thought he was supposed to be Haitian. Why is he Jamaican?" Everything about that character was possibly the last thing that you would want out of that character. And it was very clear that nobody did their. I love Marvel, and I know a lot of the people that worked in those offices back then, and I don't fault them for it, but it was very clear that there was no research done.
No, they were like, all right, listen, we're putting this character out in the 70s, and voodoo's a cool word. That's neat. And black people call themselves brother all the time. So why don't we just do Brother Voodoo? Great.
Skulls.
Yes. Zombies.
Yeah.
It's always perilous and it's always fraught. And the only way forward is carefully and with some level of humility. And I think that we are beginning to reap the rewards of 20, 25 years of nerds
Yeah.
existing and learning how to thrive and figuring out their path to a place where they get to make stuff like this. An audience who's desperately hungry for it and has been patiently, and in some cases not so patiently, waiting for it.
Yeah. The next step is to just get the nerds into the executive positions, and then
Yeah,
it becomes the glorious bubble that we all dream of.
indeed. The object lesson of that is Kevin Feige, right?
Oh,
Like, he's a
absolutely.
big honking nerd.
Yeah.
And you put a big honking nerd in charge of big honking nerd stuff who's got both the knowledge and the deep history with these characters, but also the flexibility to know we got to change up some of this. If we just do it the way it was done before, it's not going to play the way we want it to play. And so, all right, let's do something different. Let's get different people in here. Let's come at it in a different way. Let's completely change what Civil War was about and make it something totally
Oh,
different and
yeah.
personal. When you hold too closely to those things that you love, it's when you kind of strangle it of all of its kind of freedom.
Yeah.
That was the DC lesson, was the like, hey, I know how much you love Green Lantern, but nobody else in the world loves it the way you love it. So you kind of got to back off a little bit
Well,
because you got to make some changes.
yeah. It feels like maybe at this point Warner Brothers and DC are finally saying, "Hey, let's stop trying to copy what they're doing over there and let's just make some stuff." They're starting to throw some ingredients in the pot that they've never heard of before, and they're like, "Let's see what this tastes like."
What's this? I don't know. Let's try it. Okay. But we know that they're making the best pizza in the world over there. So if we make pizza over here, it's just not going to be as good.
Yeah, now they're trying for deep dish instead of trying to make New York pizza.
Totally. Or they're just making a gyro. I'm sorry, a gyro. My Greek friends in New York would be very upset at me.
I have hope for all this stuff, but I also get really scared because I, f- I feel like even though we do have so many things like Watchmen and Lovecraft Country and Black Panther, it almost feels like those are the gimmies. We did that for you, so now we're just gonna get back to the way stuff works. The
Mhm.
tried and true way. I get scared that there's a secret limit to what Hollywood is allowing, and I'm hoping that it really does just kind of keep opening up.
I think the gates are open further than they've ever been before, but that is not to say the gates are wide open. As always, money should override any kind of inherent long term, overtly racist decision making.
Yeah,
You can't look at a movie like Black Panther and say there's no audience for this.
yeah,
You can't look at a movie, especially like Black Panther, and say, oh, well, they're just coasting on brand familiarity.
yeah,
It's like, yeah, yes, Marvel is the giant brand, and so people will go because it's Marvel. But nobody knows who Black Panther is outside the 200,000 comic nerds who've been reading. It proves that there's an audience hungry for it. And even before that, you look at the Fast and Furious movies. They built themselves a behemoth by being the most diverse team of thieves and car drivers that the world has ever seen. It's not out of the realm of possibility that, like, hey, there's an audience for this.
yeah.
There's an audience that looks like this, that wants to see more of this. And so I think Hollywood learns its lessons slowly and with great agony, but they do learn them, especially when there's success involved.
Owning a comic book store, I'm constantly devouring all this really cool stuff. Comic books are essentially the first step in making a movie. It's a storyboard. Have you read the comic Bitterroot?
Yes.
Oh my God. Bitterroot is about a family in the 20s in Harlem, the roaring 20s, and they are a family of monster hunters. And it is just fantastic. It's supernatural meets Harlem Nights in the best way. So I read that and I'm like, why is this not a movie? I was like, somebody get the cast from Black Panther and tell them to suit up because this is the next movie. I feel like it would still just dominate the world. It's so good. In terms of comics and books, are there any that you kind of have been reading that you're in black nerddom, kind of, or blurrdom?
I think the most recent thing that I read that I dug was the Holmes and Watson books, where they kind of recast Sherlock Holmes and Watson as Harlem detectives.
I do not know about this. Wait, this is a comic book or a book?
This is a comic book. This is a comic book. It's gone on, I think it's like 2 or 3 trades in.
What?
And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. If for no other reason than the reconceptualization of Holmes and Watson and what they have to represent. It's always the trick of an update or a reboot, right? What are the necessary elements you have to have in here to make it feel like the thing it is?
If Johnny E. Miller and Benedict Cumberbatch can be Holmes in modern times, then it's not that far-fetched of an idea.
It's not that far-fetched. All you really need is your kind of borderline sociopath detective. You need your war veteran doctor buddy.
Yep.
And you need a city, or at least parts of a city, that they know better than anybody else and can kind of lay claim to as a protectorate.
Yeah.
From then on, everything else is open to interpretation, and to just sort of recast it and reset it. It's pretty great. I highly recommend, if you have not checked it out, that you check that out.
I didn't know it existed. I'm actually going to be checking the distributor for it. Have you read Johans? I haven't finished reading it yet, but it's an indie. It's by a guy named, or at least his art name is Midas Monkey, Midas, and it is an intergalactic Afro-future space opera. The main character is kind of this like black Han Solo, and the artwork feels very similar to the production designs of Wakanda and Black Panther and in the MCU, but just heightened by 1,000 with insane Technicolor and in space. It's pretty cool.
On your word, I will track this thing down.
Well, I think we are out of time. Where can everybody find you on the internet, Mark?
It's not overly difficult because, as I'm an old man and got to the internet first, my handles are all my name. On Twitter and on Instagram, I am at Marc Bernardin. It's Mark with a C because of French.
Thanks for talking with me, man. This was very cool. I have been Jean Michel, and you can find me under Megabrain Comics. Mostly what you will find is a rockin' comic book store / arcade.
Man, I wish those existed nearer to me. I have rockin' comic book stores. I have no arcades.
Ooh.
And if I found one that was both, I would never leave.
Thank you for listening, everybody.
If you liked today's episode, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and tell a friend about Misshelved. To keep up to date with all of our bookish hijinks, follow us at Misshelved Pod on Twitter and Instagram. If you really like what happens here, and we hope you do, head over to our Patreon page to help fund this podcast and our Misshelved newsletter. Thank you for listening, and as always, happy reading.